Yes, Susan, your baby's beautiful. Welcome to The Big Puzzle. In this podcast, we explore the subtle connections between science, religion, politics, economics, and history. One piece at a time, we unveil the big picture of this shared experience that we call life. For today's piece of the puzzle, we're going to be talking a little more about our minds, especially how our minds are organized. A way to visualize this is levels. So we could say that our mind is organized in different levels. And as far as we know, those levels also correspond with levels in our brain. So the deeper levels are the more intuitive, the more primal, the ones that have to do with the core functions. And as we move up or outside in the brain, we have the more rational, the more elaborated, the more high-level intellectual activities. Right? And then we have an in-between. Interestingly enough, this also kind of corresponds with the levels that Maslow identified in his hierarchy of needs, and you probably are familiar with the concept of what they call the Maslow's pyramid. We might discuss them in more detail in some other piece of the puzzle. But for now, these three concepts, the idea of our mind, our brain, and our needs are correlated, are organized in levels. We all would like to be known as rational people, right? Nobody wants to be seen as an irrational person. But those lower level functions and thoughts and parts of our mind do have a strong influence in everything that we do, even when sometimes we don't realize. So let's do a little thought experiment. Something that we would consider rational would be the economy, right? So how do we interact in society? But let's do this thought experiment. Let's say that you want to buy a car. And it's a car that you wanted for a long time. You've been saving money for it. It's your dream car. It has all the features, the color that you want, and everything. It's really, really your dream car. And you want to buy it. So how much money are you willing to pay for that car? So keep that number in your mind. Now let's change the scenario a little. Let's say now that you already have that car. You've been enjoying it for a long time, and it's exactly what you dreamed of. So you enjoy driving it, you enjoy showing it to your friends. It's really something that you really like. And now somebody comes and wants to buy the car from you. How much money are you going to ask to sell that car? Now compare those two numbers. If you're a normal person, most likely the price that you put to sell is higher than the price that you put to buy a car. Why the difference? Why is this spread between the car when you own it and when you don't own it? Why is it more valuable when you own it? Why do you have this Midas touch? That now the car is made of gold just because you are the owner. Now, if we think in our higher level thought functions, well, you agree that it's an object that should have one price. It only has one value. But what's happening is that without you noticing, that analysis is reaching lower levels in your brain. And the lower levels are more selfish. So every one of us is selfish. You just need to go deep enough. And there is a reason for that. And we're going to explore that during this episode. Another example could be your behavior during traffic. I think that we all been guilty of not tolerating somebody doing something that we easily justify when we do it, right? So this is another manifestation that we have this selfish bias towards ourselves. oh, I needed to change lanes. I mean, this person should have, give me room to do that. There's no reason why they're complaining. Oh, this guy just cut me off, and and you're tempted to say things that you usually don't say. So again, it's the same from a third person point of view. It's the exact same thing that happened, but you attribute different value to your right, either to move in traffic or let other people move in traffic. You value differently depending if it's yours or if it's theirs. So again, this is a manifestation of these lower levels in our brain, and this has an impact in our everyday lives. For instance, I'm a strong proponent of capitalism, but even in capitalism, we have problems due to this duality that we all have. So we were talking about the car, but this applies to absolutely everything. In capitalism, you probably learned at school that the prices are determined by the intersection of the supply curve and the demand curve. And that is true. You are negotiating, you're agreeing on the price. But what happens again is that depends on which side of the transactions you are. In capitalism, everybody that is selling, they feel like they sold for cheap. And everybody that is buying, they feel that they're buying expensive. So capitalism inherently has this characteristic of insatisfaction. Right? You're never fully satisfied when you do a transaction. So again, this has to do with the irrationality, with our bias towards ourselves. And let me clarify something. When I say bias is a word that has been abused a lot lately, but still it's an important concept. We are absolutely biased towards ourselves. We prioritize our needs to other people's needs. And there's a reason for that. But before we talk about the reason, let's consider one other place where this manifests. And this is the justice system, right? If you're a judge and you want to know if you were really fair, one way that you could tell is that both parties are equally mad about your decision. Right? If one of the parties is celebrating, then you probably were not fair enough. And obviously, I'm talking of generalities. There are exceptions always, but you get the idea, right? So this idea that what my rights are more important than other people's rights, it's everywhere and permeates everything that we do in society, even when we're trying not to. Now let's talk about the why this is useful, why this is necessary. And the key is in the comment that I made at the beginning about the baby. We are biased towards ourselves, and that means that we're also biased towards our family. The reason why is because at these very low levels, we're really just animals. We are pools of genes walking around and trying to perpetuate our genes. Obviously, when you go to the upper levels, you understand that you're probably not the best specimen that humanity ever saw. But the lower you go, that rationality diffuses, and yes, you are the most important thing, and your family is the most important thing. And that has to do with the survival instinct that we all have. And why is that important? Because sometimes we don't have time to be rational. And let me put this example. Let's say that we are all absolutely rational, like Mr. Spock. Right? And we're facing a crisis. Let's say there's a fire in the building. And then you, being a rational being, you will start thinking about, okay, what is the most important thing to save from this building? well, this person is talented for this, they could probably do this other person like that. So when you finish that process, everybody's dead. But what really happens is that your animal brain, the lower level parts of your mind, they just kick in and they say, I need to save my family. And since everybody's doing the same thing, that easily organizes the work that has to be done. There's no time to lose. There's no time to get to the upper levels. So we need to manage that duality. The problem, like I mentioned, is when we try to use the upper level in emergency situations, but it happens the other way around. If you have time to think and you just react with your lower level biases, well, then you're also ruining things, right? So this is why we need those two levels, and part of growing up as a human being is learning when to use which. As a side note, and probably a connector for another piece in the future, this could also be applied to stereotypes. So when we talk about stereotypes, there's this similar situation where stereotypes could be very useful, could really save your life, but if applied incorrectly, they could harm people. But let's leave that for future discussion. Growing as a human being is actually departing from those basic levels and build strong upper levels. And we can see that in our development since we're babies. We're very selfish. We don't care about anything. We don't understand reason. You're hungry, you will get food, whatever it takes, right? When you grow and start interacting with other people and realize the value on those interactions, well, then you start behaving differently. You understand that there are certain agreements, certain rules that you need to follow, that you can't just get what you want anytime that you want it. That's at least what we should be doing. But the highest levels are developed through empathy. When you develop empathy is when you understand how other people are feeling. You are sharing those feelings even though you're not going through their experience. And that's how you can use your rational brain to put yourself in a situation where you're not really in, and you can learn from that and you can act accordingly. So I would say that empathy is probably what would take you to the upper level in your development. Now, as usual, there's always people willing to take the worst from us. And let me explain you how this happens. Sometimes it's difficult for us to conciliate our feeling of being more important than the rest with our circumstances. And for instance, one of those cases is when you're poor. When you're poor and you want to feel important, well, you have a disconnect between the two. So the idea, again, is that you develop empathy, that you look at rich people and you start thinking like they're thinking. You understand how they became rich. You understand the things that you need to change to leave poverty. So that's a useful way to navigate that duality, to realize that the disconnect has to be somehow resolved. The problem is that there's always people willing to take you in another direction. And in this case, what they would do is to tell you, oh no, you're important because you're poor. You're a victim and you should be proud of your victimhood. It's not your fault that you're poor. There's nothing you can change. There's nothing you should change. You should embrace your poverty, and you should attack and you should despise rich people. So that's a cheap way to reconciliate your your bias, your rational brain, your sense of self-importance with your circumstances. So you make being poor your identity, and you feel superior because you are inferior. That's very damaging for you. But as a political system, it's very useful. It's actually called socialism. In socialism, you just convince people that somebody owes them something. It's not your fault. You're not supposed to change. You're not supposed to become better. You're not supposed to overcome. You're not supposed to try to understand why you are where you are and what you should do not to be there. It's just settle down, don't change anything, and get things from other people. Now, this happens, and it's very useful in the early stages of socialism, like we discussed in other pieces of the puzzle. Well, socialism evolves. And once you convince people that it's good to be poor, you actually stop promoting that much, right? Because you really don't care about people. Once you got the power over the people, you don't care how they feel. You don't care if they feel important or not. So in the late stages of socialism, there's just abuse. It's just abuse. Yeah, they keep saying, oh, being poor is so good and you should be proud of your poverty. While at the same time, you have mansions and you're, extremely rich. Not only in political systems this happens, but you can think also some of the things that we've seen recently with movements like body positivity. I struggle with body weight all my life, and it's very tempting to say, oh, I just have to accept myself and be proud of my overweight and my fat and everything. But biology doesn't care. You would die. And it's sad to see how many of these promoters really died young and had very miserable lives, when what they really needed to do to reconcile this view of self-importance with their circumstances is making some changes that make you feel better, make you feel accomplished, that really make you more important in a real way, because you can contribute to society and to your family and to everybody if you are healthy. So this is another example. There's a lot of destructive behaviors that we're seeing that are being promoted as things that you should embrace. Whenever you hear the word pride, you should be worried. Pride is not a good thing. Pride is connected to entitlement, and entitlement is connected to bias, to your own importance, to your selfishness, to your egotism. So if I could give you a homework, analyze yourself and see if you're applying the parts of your mind to the problems correctly. See if you're developing empathy, even empathy with people that you don't like, that you feel you're a victim. You might discover very, very interesting things. So this will be it for today. I hope you enjoy this piece of the puzzle. I appreciate you joining me. I would love to read what you think about it, so you can leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, and if you like this type of content, I would invite you to subscribe and also to share it with your friends. Like I said before, if you don't like it and you think this is terrible, I would invite you to share it with your enemies. I really hope to see you in the next one, and until then, bye.